Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to some of you. Peace out to the rest of you. Black heart, black mind, black in. Again, hit the share button because the message is more important than the messenger. This one is probably going to be long. I'm just going to go ahead and say it outright from the beginning. I expect this to take a while. I don't think there's a way it won't be. In July of 2017, I recorded something talking about how black Muslims may have to refuse to intermarry Muslims of other races. Because when we say we will not marry Muslims that are not black or black friendly, we're told that we're all kinds of racist. When other Muslims that aren't black say that they will not marry black, that's understood. That's a preference. And this is throughout the Muslim world. And that's why I say I will sit up and tell you black folks you have every right to a personal preference. And then I turn around and tell these tragic desert mulattoes and sand crackers, you don't have this right to that because the reason is because, simply put, here it's not a personal preference, it's cultural, and they say it's personal. So as to not offend us. And I'm like, no, nigga, this is cultural. And I know it's cultural. Matter of fact, it's worse than cultural because you have an inferiority complex. And how do I know you have one? You don't just prefer your women over visibly black women. You prefer white women over your own women. That's why I say that. Nigga, something's wrong with you. You are not normal. I say this to them for this reason. When black men have personal preferences, they really are personal. I mean, a lot of women have a shot. When black women in America have preferences, again, it's just like the men here and the women here. It's not personal. Their preferences tend to, they do have personal preferences, but they don't even choose based on them. They choose based on groupthink and a hive mind. We all know this. I've covered it. Jay Cash has covered it. They're not only looking at what they want, they're prioritizing over their own wants what their friends want and what they can show off to their friends. This is normal. So that's why I'll say one thing to one group of people and something else to another. And I don't have respect for their culture, so to speak. And this has put me at odds with some people before, because I put Islam over the culture, and the ones who actually are serious about Islam understand. And that's a breath of fresh air to them. We can hang out, but there are others that don't. So anyway, this being said, in July, I recorded this. July of 2017, I recorded something to the effect, and that was in the title, Why Black Muslims May Have to Refuse to Intermarry at Times, and refuse people coming to us when they're not black, trying to marry our black lady relatives. That was July. August the 2nd of 2017, I recorded something different. August the 2nd of 2017, I recorded and I entitled it, Why Black Militants May Have to Marry Non-Blacks. Let's talk about pro-blacks in general. Why did I record that? I'm talking to you men that are pro-black and that are sincerely pro-black. So maybe you don't think you're the best at being pro-black, but you mean it. You're sincere about it. I'm talking to you, and I'm going to tell you, I'm addressing this to you. So here's the deal. In June, I knew of one thing, and I knew what I knew back then. In August, that's when something happened that jarred my memory. The last days of July and the first days of August was when my memory got jarred, and I could recall what I'd learned in 2001. Around that time, had finished the divorce from the North African lady. My close friend from West Africa, who was her in-law, married to her niece, said to me, well, you and her each are free to marry somebody else now at this point. I'm not going to be able to find her anybody. In her own country, despite being a good person, she's a widow with children. That's going to drive a lot of men away. They don't even hate her. They're just not going to take on that responsibility. You were heroic for doing that. And everybody knew it. Her brothers, who were nervous about her getting married, also knew this. But you, black, are also free. and you're not a widower, and your kids are not someone else's responsibility, I can find you someone. So I said to him, well, listen, I need to know what to do next, because the only argument she and I had was about blackness and her views of, tropical black Africans. And we never had a problem before this came out. Looking back, she would not have been with me had I been a tropical black West African, like your father-in-law. So she would not have considered me. And I know this now. And to me, that's bad, because how you going to be like a Salafi of all kinds of Muslims and have this kind of thought process? I don't want that. I don't want this again. And even though she treated me well and it was great while it lasted, and even though she was the best wife or girlfriend I'd ever had up to that point, I wasn't going to go through that again, because again, I'm pro-black. And if you got problems with black people and blackness, you can have problems with anybody's culture as long as it's consistent. But if you got problems with black people and blackness, even if you are black and you admit it, we got issues. Because that means you love the oppressor over the oppressed. You consider the oppressor to be normal and the oppressed to have deserved it somehow. That means you think God is a racist if you're religious about it. So I told him, I said, listen, being pro-black, maybe an African woman, like a black African woman, should not be with me. Especially if they got an inferiority complex. And I'm not going to be with a North African, even though there's no question of a personal color conflict, because they still got problems with those of your shade, telling this to my friend. So, in order to know what to do next, I'm willing to listen to your advice. Now, he said to me, he told me, listen, it's easier for you to find somebody, a black West African, a black tropical African, that has no issues with shade and who would judge you and assess you personally, than it is for you to find a North African that would have still been with you had you been darker. I think you're better off getting somebody from the motherland, from the tropical parts of the motherland, from your own origin. I said, yes, I guess so. So he introduced me, or he was going to introduce me to two. There were three he tried. One was a Caribbean lady living in the continent. Speaking of people from the islands that spend time on the continent, shout out to Don Calypso. So there was that lady, but she resembled my American ex too much, and I knew that wasn't going to work, and it wasn't her fault. The other one was an African American from New York. She had kids. She wasn't that attractive anyway. I wasn't going through that. I'm like, no, that's okay. Then there was an African American from New York who saw my photograph and then told him not to worry about sending her photograph to me. So I had to consider the possibility. And something said to me, that's probably the best looking one, because that's just how it works. So I asked him, who's the best looking one? And he confirmed my suspicions. The one who never sent her photo to him to send to me was the best looking one. I said to him, listen, said to my friend, I want to be fair. Now, if I'm just ugly, then I need to go one route. If I'm not ugly and I'm just not her type, then I need to go another route. But I need to know, because it's time that I get some honest feedback. She told you I'm not her type. It's okay. You have my permission to go back and ask her if I'm just not her type or if I'm outright ugly. And then, from there, we'll make a decision. You got my permission. Whatever she says, you can come back and tell me, because I'm just figuring out what's the next step. He said to me, Black, if you were ugly, dummy, you would have heard this again and again and again and again. If you were ugly, my wife's aunt would not have married you. He told me, nope, that's not the issue. You're not. So I thanked him for for speaking in my defense, and I said, but see, you know, as a friend, you may be biased. And he told me, yeah, but when have I ever been willing to lie for somebody? When was the last time you were called ugly? And I told him it was in ninth grade. Ninth grade now. And he said to me, well, see, that's it. That's just it. I didn't tell him, look, man, I've been mistreated and I've been lied to and had them play games and been disrespected in ways other men haven't been. I didn't get that far. What he said to me was, this lady here, she's the type that chases after a certain kind of guy. And in reality, I should not have tried to introduce you to her. But she said that she was looking to get married. But she is the type that, I mean, she has a type. And she said to me, is he even black? That's what she asked me about you, black. He's telling me this, that she said about my photograph. What she wants is just somebody that's more recognizably black. That's what it is. You don't have to be ugly if you don't look black enough. And when he said those words, that jarred my memory of 2001. And so I recorded what I recorded. Now back then, gentlemen of Pro-Black Bend, I recorded this thinking, okay, well, this is bound to be a two-sided thing. There are going to be some sisters that can do and have and be a lot and very accomplished and everything else, but they can't necessarily find brothers that are on their level because of preferences. I thought this was something that went both ways. See, I wasn't as one-sided back then as I am now, because now I know more. That's why I recorded one thing in June and then turned around and recorded something else in August. I'd just gotten back from my vacation to the States. I learned a few things, and as a matter of fact, it was on that vacation that my parents told me that they knew of certain instances in which not only I, but our family went through either differentiated treatment or outright mistreatment based on the phenotype and not being from that region. Because even though we are from that region, we didn't know that at that time. Because my grandparents had my parents way away from the Gulf Coast. So having roots there, well, yeah, we do, but we were not aware growing up. It just so happened that that's where my dad found a job, and we wound up moving, so to speak, back home. So since we weren't from the town in which I grew up, and we looked that way, there was no explanation for it. It wasn't like the families that looked that way. So they told me there were cases you were being mistreated based on this. But we didn't know what it was at the time because people don't say it. Now, I'm telling you this story, gentlemen of a pro-black bend, to get you to understand something. I want you to think about the whole phase that's being discussed right now. This whole phase, as Green Gorilla has said, and I plan to listen to this soon, inshallah, is not a phase, it is a lifelong commitment. And to a certain extent, they understand that, and that's why they want to, while they go through a whole phase and screw a whole bunch, they also want to keep a whole bunch of men inexperienced, unseasoned, and unoptioned. You see, the numbers of men that they want to screw are small compared to the population of men, but the numbers of men they want to screw are still high numbers for one woman. Perfect combination. It's the perfect storm, the perfect combination of evil upon evil upon evil. They want to go through a bunch of ding-a-lings. Now, what kind of man do you think they say only deserves to take these hoes after their hoe phase and risk being cheated on again? Because it is lifelong commitment. Hell, it's an addiction. Now stop and think about this, gentlemen of a pro-black bend. You know how insulting it is when a woman has been a hoe and then turns around and decides that she's gonna settle down with you. But there's no way you would have been able to smut her out like the other guys. You don't have to want to smut her out like the other guys, but the fact that her decision would have been hell no, but now you can settle down with her, is an insult to you. Don't get that twisted, gentlemen. Being turned down by sluts can be a blessing, but that's never how they intended. They intended as an insult. And they don't apologize for that either. That's one thing they never apologize for. When a slut turns you down, she's insulting you, even if she's helping you in the long run and doesn't know it. So stop and think about what that insult is and what that means to you, gentlemen of a pro-black bend. Now that you know this, now that you understand this, gentlemen, stop and think for a second. If you want to use Family Matters as an allegory for all of these, yeah, they'll screw someone like Carl Winslow Jr., or Eddie Winslow. I forgot what the son's name was, played by Darius McCrary. Yeah, they'll do someone like him, and then they'll even do somebody like Waldo. Steve is the one that gets to settle down with them after the whole phase. But that's not all. It gets further than that. You gentlemen of a pro-black bend, much like myself, need to realize that your simple pro-blackness, especially when you mean it, because that means you will make decisions based on that as a pro-black man, as an authentic, sincere, well-meaning pro-black man, these very decisions make you corny to these women. Now, they may not, they may not treat you the way they would treat Urkel at a young age, but understand this, they have about as much respect for you. You also are one of these men that they view as less than manly. See, when that movie, I'm Gonna Get You Sucker, came out, y'all saw that scene with Kalinga. Jack Spade goes into the Revolutionary People's Army's headquarters or something like that. And then there's Kalinga in there, and Kalinga's, it turns out, is with a white pro-black woman and some white stepkids that are they're not his and they're not even mixed. Now, why is that? See, some of us missed what that was. We thought, oh, that's a spoof, just like on Don't Be a Menace to South Central While Drinking Your Juice in the Hood. There was that character, Preach, and Preach was pro-black, but he was stupid. They even say in there, what about the time you jumped Byron? Byron was light-skinned. Preach wasn't the blackest ninja himself. And then he was, getting with that pasty-looking white woman. Oh, I'm just doing what they've been doing to us for 500 years. F them. That type stuff. But see, in that one, that was a spoof on how you had these fake pro-blacks, really pro-whack, that they were pursuing these white women and would find them in hiding places almost. That's what they were doing. But by the same token, it also has to be understood that they were being pursued, and this was more talked about in Kalinga. Well, I shouldn't say talked about, but that was what I could pick up from it. See, Kalinga was not a dumb pro-black. He was not somebody that just got a little bit of knowledge and then went too far with it, was too gone off of one book. But how did he wind up with her? You see, at that point, I understood what that was about. You, gentlemen, when you are pro-black and you are rightfully angry about certain injustices, you become corny to them, much like Urkel. And you're going to get the same options that Urkel would get. And they mean this as an insult to you, just like they would mean it to Urkel. That's what that's about. They want you to be unsatisfied and thirsty until they can bring to you diseases, debt, and mostly other men's kids. It's not just for the guy that has no jawline, and it ain't just for the guy that can't play any sport and he's just weak. It's not just for those, that archetype, which is largely a stereotype anyway. It's not just for them. No, that insulting lack of options is also for you. You were included in that. And so what I was recording in August of 2017 was simply put, now something I would say only to the men. Because pro-black women don't get turned down for being pro-black. Let's be honest about that. That's not corny, nothing like that. Somebody might say, well, you're strong. She's a strong African-American woman. But we don't sit up and say that's why I can't be with her in most cases. We're more likely to say, well, that's why I just got to have my stuff together. But they still got options. No. See, as a man, you can say this, and even a lot of pro-black women, or seemingly pro-black women, would not find you attractive. And that's okay that they don't. On a personal level, But what I'm saying is that even many of them may still want that rough nigger stereotype, the idness. Because even to a certain extent, when they are pro-black, they still have to undo the programming that tells them to view you through the eyes of white supremacist stereotypes. Just like we have to learn to stop viewing each other through sisters' eyes, who in turn view us through the eyes of white supremacist stereotypes. The pro-blackest thing, and I know that's not a word, but the most sincerely or authentically pro-black thing you can do in many cases, gentlemen with a pro-black bend, is to cut off the Western sister. Don't give her a chance. Unless maybe she's approaching you and has her stuff together. And that's something they'll tell you they're not going to do. Well, if I have all our stuff together, why should I have to make the first approach? They should be approaching me if I got all my stuff together. You know what? Knock them off that horse a little bit. Not even for your ego, but for your actual benefit. You need to understand, gentlemen, you've also been insulted en masse as a whole in ways you don't deserve and didn't earn, simply because to them, because they can do that. That's how they feel. Why not? You've been insulted. You've been pushed to the back, not even because you're ugly, but because you're pro-black. And the best thing you may be able to do is to start looking in different parts of the continent for women that think more like you do, or Southeast Asia. Really, I'm dead serious. Now you may say, well, Southeast Asians ain't black. Why would we do that? Well, they're not enemies either. See, the Indian woman, if she's not an enemy herself, her family will be. Selector Jaw told you that. They can live in a black country for centuries, and they will remain genetically distinct. Even when they've lost their culture, they're going to try to remain genetically distinct because of the difference in phenotypes. That's how embedded this is. They could have lost their Hinduism generations ago. Don't speak a lick of any old language from back home. They just got different, but they will still have different last names, a different phenotype, and they ain't gonna look at you like you're an equal. That's the thing I need y'all to understand. That's in Trinidad. That's in a black nation. In Kenya, an Indian from India told me how the Kenyan Indians treated the black Kenyans, and he was embarrassed. And he said, he told me I began to feel like I was an intruder because I knew what my people deserved in Kenya. He was pretty much saying they deserved to be grabbed up and driven the uck out like what happened in Uganda. And if you're Indian and you're listening to this, I support Idi Amin 100% in what he did when he grabbed the Indian and said, get the fuck out of Uganda. Not because I even hate you. Most of you that know me, most of y'all are Muslim, and you don't buy into white supremacy for the most part. But you know your people do. And especially those of your people that leave India. And so I support Idi Amin in that. They were in a black country in Africa, and they still had these attitudes. So I'm just going to go ahead and say it. I mean, Mississippi Masala was a movie specifically because Denzel's character was black and the other lady was Indian. If it had been a reverse arrangement, the man was Indian and the woman was black, it would have been strange, but it would not have caused the same controversy. And even then, the man would have been made fun of to a certain extent. But the community was, you know, the community gets offended when it is a black man on top of an Indian woman. So keep this in mind, gentlemen. That's why I'm saying what I'm saying. The pro-black thing to do in this case would be to leave alone these sisters because they're not selecting you. And yes, I'm talking about with the womb. No, they don't owe it to you. But you know what? You don't necessarily owe them all the benefits of a husband without them selecting you the way that a wife has to select her husband. That's the other thing. And what they want you to do is feel like if you're really pro-black, then you'll treat it like it's your duty to take care of these other men's kids, these real superior men's kids. Because what they're really saying is you're still genetically inferior. Something's wrong with you. Because you ain't part of the head bobbing, booty shaking, idness culture. Because you ain't going to be in the club spending your last rent money to get into the club, having spent the first of your rent money on a grill to stun on these hoes. You ain't going to do dumb stuff like that. You know that's not good for the team. So since you ain't going to do that, something's wrong with you. You just corny. You just can't hang. That's really what they're going to say. And that's how they're going to view it, and that's how they feel. And you under no obligation to respect some BS like that. Matter of fact, if you're really pro-black, you're under obligation to disrespect nigger culture. And who upholds it? Who upholds nigger culture? The gynocracy and niggas. In other words, the gynocracy and its goons. The matriarchy and its mandingos are the ones upholding idness culture. And you, meanwhile, you would like to re-Africanize and reorganize the culture, re-civilize it, which is a good thing. I'm not knocking that. I've already said that's what Islam is for. I mean, I've already said Islam is a solution. I was talking about specifically for that. But by the same token, I'm saying to you that while you want to do something that is actually good for our people, they're pretty much saying, no, we don't want to do that. Absolutely not. And, okay, it's good that you want to do that, but that means we're just going to use you for protection and child rearing and charity and handouts and community centers and things of this nature. We're going to use you for that, but there's absolutely going to be no benefit for you, especially genetically, because you don't deserve that. Because you're inferior to the no good niggas that we're trying to teach our kids to not imitate, even though they were the only ones we were willing to use to conceive the babies. In other words, gentlemen of a pro-black bend, you are being just as insulted as Urkel is, without you even being Urkel. Despite your manhood, which is of a pro-black bend, of course, as it should be, you are still being insulted because your manhood can't even be recognized as manhood. Your African male masculinity can't even be seen as that. So, you know what? You don't owe anything. Matter of fact, you owe it to take your resources and anything good about you elsewhere, either back to the continent and only certain parts that'll appreciate it, or Southeast Tropical Asia, even if they ain't us, because they ain't our enemies either. That's what I was getting at in August the 2nd of 2017 when I said what I said. Only now I'm telling you this is not a two-sided thing. We ain't shut sisters out because of that. They shut us out. And they're allowed to have their preferences, and they must also live with the outcomes of their choices, just like we do. So, in a nutshell, this is MOT's message as it pertains to, I just thought of this as I was talking, this is MOT's message as it pertains to pro-black men who get calls asking for help at any hour of the night and ain't never got a booty call. And I know what I said sounds misogynistic and sexist. So goddamn what? It's not. It's really just meant to be fair. But if you're going to, I'm saying this to say that if you're going to mentor these kids because that is your bend, then the best way to mentor the children, especially when they're not yours, is in a way specifically that their mothers would not appreciate. That means you're going to have to tell these kids things about their own mother's choices. Just like Steffes Cole, Stephen Klingscales, came to realize about his own mother's choices. He had to confront his own mom's choices and what that meant. You're going to have to do the same thing, and you're going to have to mentor. If you really want to help these kids, you're going to have to mentor these kids with exactly that. Yes, mostly because they don't like it. Because what they want is to be able to understand. They are insisting on being able to continue with a whole phase and escape the consequences, and you are the means of escape for them. And you are not to be reduced to that. You are the one that least deserves to be reduced to that. I hope that this message has been of benefit. Black heart, black mind, black out. Assalamu alaikum and black heterosexual non-select male power just cause they don't like it.